Alrighty, I'm just making sure we are live here before we get started. Just want to make sure we're on all the platforms. We do Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. So I just want to make sure everybody can see us. Alrighty, I think we are good. Fabulous. Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our Common Sense Parenting live video. My name is Gabby, joined here as always with our Common Sense Parenting expert, Bridget Barnes. And we are also joined with one of our wonderful experts from behavioral health, Christopher. It's great to have you on to join us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Doing well, great. So, spring sports is in full swing, and with that, we are discussing tips for talking to your young athlete. If you have any questions as we go through our live discussion, go ahead and leave it in the comments, and we will answer at the end. So, Bridget has been our Common Sense Parenting expert for many years now, but Christopher, we would love to have you introduce yourself and tell us more about your role at the Boys Town Center of Behavioral Health.
Sure. So I'm a doctoral intern getting my doctorate in clinical psychology with an emphasis on child and adolescent clinical psychology. And as part of our training, we do a 1-year rotation somewhere in the country. And I was lucky enough to get matched at Boys Town. And I'm absolutely loving it out here. And I really like all the different things that Boys Town's involved in. And one of them is, getting to share kind of how we can help parents.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, great to have you on. So our first discussion question here is for parents with younger kids first getting involved in organized sports, what is important to remember in the beginning to teach? Bridget, what would you say?
Well, I think before I start teaching, I start talking to kids about the sports that they like and really listening to them. So, talking to them and listening to them, and then finding information about different sports, going to look at it, going to visit, seeing, talking to other athletes and players so that they can make a good informed decision. So, before, I start teaching them, the social skills that it might take to be involved in the sport, like being able to follow instructions, accept no, and working with others. I definitely talk and listen to my kid about what are they interested in, and then finding out information and visiting different sports so they can kind of experience it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Would you add anything, Chris?
I think I agree with everything Bridget said. And I think a great way that parents can help their kids kind of test out different sports they might be interested in is sign up for a youth sports camp over the summer. It's a really low risk way to get to try a whole bunch of different sports out and find out what they like without maybe doing a big time or money commitment.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
That's great. Well, Christopher used to be involved in sports, even, when his younger years and in college. So that is a really great tip. Thanks so much for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with trying out multiple different sports in that way, sometimes parents will ask us, when my kids are younger, should I really have them be trying those, or should I try to get them to focus on 1 to 2 to really tap into what they're good at an early age? What would you say, Bridget?
Well, experts say to allow them to be involved in lots of different sports at first, so they can kind of choose what really interests them. So when they're young, it's better for them to try out this and that and the other. And like, Christopher was saying, get involved in some sports activities during the summer that, doesn't cost a lot of money. And then once they choose, maybe 2 sports to kind of try out, I think this helps to avoid burnout. Are you imposing on them your sport? My husband was a track star and, definitely into athletics in college and as a young person. And so when my son got interested in that, he was like, yay. And I was like, well, let's look at soccer. And so, that kind of got both those things done where he was on the track team, but he also was involved in soccer.
Mm-hmm. I think too, sometimes there's a little bit of pressure. You always hear those Olympic athletes who I'm thinking I did gymnastics. So I'm thinking, when Simone Biles says, I started gymnastics when I was 2,
Mm-hmm.
Some parents might think, oh my goodness, well, my child is already 5 to 6 and hasn't really found their favorite sport, but that's totally fine. They're only 5 or 6 and they don't have to have their one sport that they are tied to that young.
Right. And listening to the child, I think Christopher would agree, some children know what they want. I mean, they start flipping around and doing that sport and they're like, I love this thing. And that's their thing, right? But that kid is telling you, this is what I love to do. And they might change your mind later, but following the child's lead, but, having that kind of conversation and listening to the child and making sure that this is the best thing for them. So, yeah. Christopher, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with everything you said. I do definitely agree that, and when kids are younger, they should try out a couple different sports and find out what they like and also, what they're good at. And I also agree that as kids move up, especially as you're getting into the middle school and high school years, they're going to start to naturally pare down the sports that they really care about versus the sports they might not care about so much. And I think kids might pick a preferred sport for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's because their friends are on the team. Maybe it's because they want to play indoor versus outdoor. And I love what you said where, let your kid take the lead on this and just be curious and also very open to what they are saying about sports.
For sure. So when it comes to parenting our young athletes, what tips do you have for being supportive and encouraging during their athletic journey? Bridget?
Well, I believe that I need to be my kids' biggest cheerleader. I am their biggest fan, right? And when they do things, no matter how small or how big, I'm cheering for them. And I need to be supporting the coaches and the team, and make sure that what I can do is provide healthy snacks or make sure we do a fundraiser for good equipment, make sure the kids are hydrated. I would work with their pediatrician and the sports therapist to make sure health-wise that they're, okay with everything like that. That's my position. I take a back seat to talking about athletics. I have no idea about how to run fast or a lot of soccer things, but I do try to make sure that I'm their biggest cheerleader. I'm their fan and I'm supporting the team.
Chris, what would you say?
I think once again, Bridget's spot on. I would say, showing up, being present, being on time. I can remember plenty of times when, I would walk out onto the field or the court, or I swam and played water polo, so jump in the pool and I get to look up in the stands and see my parents there cheering me on at the beginning of the game. And that just really, meant so much to me. And I would say this is a great time to maybe put the cell phones and tablets away and just really be present for your kid and enjoy the other company of your the other parents that are cheering their kids on.
So sometimes we know parents can struggle with the fine line between being supportive and encouraging and maybe being a little bit too hard on them. How do we identify that and not be too hard on our kids in their athletics? Chris, what would you say?
I do agree. This is a really fine line, and, every kid's going to be a little bit different. And I guess the recommendation that I have for parents is, your kid and what they're going to thrive on. And really look for those nonverbal cues. If you're really talking about, if you're rehashing the game and you can tell your kid's a little bit disconnected or they seem a little bit moody, maybe that's a time to take a step back and ask them, what do they need from you? What do they want to see? Do they want to see you in the front row cheering them on, or do they want to see you maybe, back a little bit? Do they want a big sign that's being, held up over your head and the bullhorn, or maybe they want you to tone it back a little bit. I think, as we've said, I think through these past couple minutes, letting your kid take the lead on this, this is their sport, and support them to the way that they want to be supported. The one thing I would say, though, is we want to keep it 100% positive, and we want to focus on either just our kid or our kid and their teammates being positive. I really would hesitate to make any comments towards the other team's players, the other team's coaches, or the officials.
And Bridget, you kind of said with your own child, I'm not a track star and I can't be the coach. Should we leave the coaching up to the coaches? And, thinking too for the parents who, let's say my kid someday does gymnastics and I might be, I'm really familiar with it and I know that you need to point your toes. Should I say that, or should I parent and not coach?
Yeah, I think that's why we pay the coaches to be the coaches. I'm the parent. That's my biggest job. I think it's important when I'm talking to kids about, or my children about sports, that I'm listening more than I'm talking. And I really watch my I statements. If I hear myself saying, well, I think the coach should, and I told you during the last play, I'm thinking back up, that's not what should be coming out of my mouth. I should be listening more than talking. And, does my child come to me for advice? And if they do, Boys Town has this really great tool called the SOTUS method that you can use to walk your child through a step-by-step process to make their own decision, to find out what really is the concern or the issue that they're facing. And that I'm there as a guide to help them kind of see the situation, think of some options. What are the disadvantages or advantages of those options? And then they make that final solution. This is the decision they're making in regards to what they're facing out on the field, or what they're facing in the locker room, or with their coach, or with their teammates. So that's my job, is to help them, to guide them, to support them, and to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything to add, Chris?
No, I just really like that, the introduction of the SOTUS, because it's such a valuable life lesson for kids. It's teaching them how to use this skill, but they're going to generalize that to so many areas of their life. They're going to use it with coworkers in the future, with supervisors, with bosses. I think that this is one of the things I love about sports, is it has so many valuable life lessons. And I think this is just one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we've definitely found that to be true with our kids at Boys Town on our home campus. A lot of them come to Boys Town and they have never participated in organized sports. And, I know for a lot of the families watching nationally, they might not think twice about that. Like, of course my kids are going to do sports. They're kids. But when kids come to Boys Town, especially, that's a whole new world for them. And just as Chris mentioned, teaches them a lot of skills. So great point.
Well, Gabby, I think also sports can be very expensive. It can be very time consuming. It can be a commitment for an entire family to make. And so I think, sitting down to what we call the family meeting, where everyone gets a voice about, this is the commitment that Johnny's making to hockey, which is going to cost like $2,000 or whatever amount of money, and mom having to travel, or dad, or whatever. And what does that mean for the family? And having those real conversations and talking about what is the commitment, and getting that kid to understand what commitment everyone is making so that can happen. And when the child agrees, they kind of know, okay, I'm committing to this, and this is a big ask for my family, on a financial level, on a time level, and on that commitment, I'm going to follow through on what I'm asking them to do for me.
Mm-hmm. And that leads right into the next question. We got a question about select sports in particular, and those can be so demanding, not even just for the child, but like Bridget said, for the family and as well as financially. So the next question is, with those demanding sports schedules, especially if you have multiple children doing different sports in different clubs, how do we work together as a family to kind of manage the mayhem? And especially, I'm thinking weekends, when previously it would be a family weekend. Now they're full of sports. How can we prioritize the family even with those busy schedules?
I have to say that I'm hearing more and more parents say they are just traveling from one sport to the next. They feel like a taxi driver, or, that they are not spending as much family time. And some families are beginning to make the sport their family time. And some families, unfortunately, are getting so invested in the sport that it's kind of, evolved into, this is the thing, that the sport becomes bigger than the family, than the child. And sometimes bad behavior occurs because of the investment that the family has made. And I really strongly want to suggest, and I don't know how Christopher feels about this, is that parents and children sit down at family meetings and really talk about what's going on, what's happening to us as a family, and what do we need to refocus ourselves on. Sometimes you need to take a step back and refocus as a family if things have gotten out of control, or you feel like you're really disconnected from each other, even though you're involved in the sport. What are your thoughts about that, Christopher?
No, I think that's a great suggestion. And one thing that comes to mind for me is, really make sure the non-participating kids in the family have a voice as well, and make sure that you care about their opinion and care about what they have to say regarding the sport. Some kids are not into athletics, and that's completely fine. And I just think that parents should be really being mindful about balancing time between all their kids in the family. And I know that can be difficult, and it's going to feel like you're juggling, 4 or 5 things at once, but it is really important to make sure that one kid, especially on these select teams where maybe they're playing some really high level games or tournaments, isn't overshadowing all the other kids in the family.
Yeah. I think, having that family meeting where that kid who's not in the sport has a voice and is talking about things they're interested in and as well. So just having that time, we all come together, whether it's in the car while we're traveling to the sport or while we're eating afterwards, just taking the time that everybody has a voice, everybody is saying positive things, but also sharing concerns like, gosh, I had a chess meet and nobody came to that, and I'm really concerned that you guys don't really feel like you're supporting me as much as you're supporting Christopher or whatever. And so kind of sharing that and having that time that you can share it with each other in an appropriate way, of course.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion. I think parents should also set the expectation, hey, Johnny, you're on this select team and you're playing in all these high level tournaments. Well, just like we're all showing up for you for this tournament or this game, you're also going to show up for your other sibling or brother or sister in their chess meet or at their art show or at the talent show or at their recital, and make sure that this is how families support each other. It's not just the person who's on the pedestal. We go as a family and we support each other as a family.
Great.
Yeah, great insight. Well, we just have a few more questions for Christopher and Bridget. So if you are watching live and you have a question related to your kids' sports for our experts, go ahead and leave it in the comments now so we can get it answered in that. The next question is, how can I help my child feel better after a tough loss or poor performance in their sport? Bridget?
Well, I think, I mentioned earlier about teaching kids social skills like being a good sport or accepting responsibility. It's important to teach kids that ahead of time so that when they're involved in sports, they can use those tools. But parents are going to be the best role models in regards to demonstrating those skills in those emotionally charged situations so the kids can see, oh, yeah, my mom and dad are doing that. My coaches are doing that. I should do it too. So the adults around them are a big proponent of saying, okay, this is the example we're setting. These are the skills that I've taught you, and I'm going to do that too. I was recently at a sporting event and I congratulated the coach and patted the kids on the back, and they lost, but just still saying, good job, you guys tried really hard and you played till the end. So I think, teaching them the skills and modeling in those skills are important. How about you, Christopher? What do you think we can be doing better in regards to supporting kids when they're going through a tough loss?
Yeah, I really like the idea of modeling behavior among parents and coaches. And, I think going back to what I said a little bit earlier, you're going to be, each parent is the expert on their own kid, and, use past information about how do they deal with disappointment. Do they want to get a little bit of space at first, then we talk about it later? Do they really want to be kind of surrounded and have someone just, I think we call it a voice time, shoulder to shoulder time, where maybe you're not necessarily talking, but you're just in physical proximity with them and just letting them know that, you're available if they need something. And another thing I like to talk about is with these family meetings is let's do a little bit of contingency planning or coping ahead of, hey, if we don't game tomorrow, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? What do you need from me as the parents? What would you like to see from us? And listen to the kid, let them take the lead, but also make it so if a loss does happen, it's not blindsiding them.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, I don't know if you deal with any of this in the clinic, but what about those kids who really tie their self-esteem to sports, and after a loss or a poor performance, they are thinking negatively about themselves? How can we help kind of build them back up?
Mm-hmm. I think this really starts before the loss. It starts from that unconditional positive regard. And it's actually interesting that you bring this up because we just had a journal club this past hour on how unconditional positive regard can affect kids' self-esteem when it comes to different domains in life. And sports was one of the domains that was studied. And it shows that unconditional positive regard has even within sports, it has a positive impact on the kid's self-concept and self-esteem, and really just letting the kid know from early on in their life that your self-worth is not tied to wins or losses or points scored or anything like that. You have value and we love you because you are our child, and that's just what we do as parents. I think by the time we get to that loss, there's only so much we can do, but there's so much we can do before the loss happens and just throughout their life. And I think that's where those, basic parenting skills, really come in handy from their earliest days when you're interacting with kids.
I agree with Christopher. I thought it was so important that my son learned about what it was to be a good sportsman, to be a good young man on that field, and that I praised him for the social skills. Like if he helped somebody up that fell, or he shook people's hands at the end of the game, if he showed enthusiasm but didn't try to show off, I praised him and rewarded him for those kinds of behaviors. I knew that was going to carry him through later on in life, not just on that field that day. And so I think that, when parents teach kids the importance of sports, they need to lean into the skill it takes. We have $1 million players out there, and sometimes they don't have those skills that keep them in the game. When you cannot be a good sport, accept the loss, or be okay that this sport does not define you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even just making them life skills. We talk a lot at Boys Town about competing with character and what does it mean to be a good teammate, and kind of what Christopher said earlier, those are life skills. They're not just for this sport and in this season, it is in life. So I like that. Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, if I notice my child is starting to lose passion for their sport, should I encourage them to continue and persevere, or maybe move to another activity? And this parent says, I don't want them to become a quitter and kind of bounce back and forth between all these sports, but I don't want them to burn out either. Bridget?
Well, for me, I encourage the child to review why they got into the sport in the first place. Why, the big why am I involved in that sport, the love of the sport. Maybe the child still loves the sport, but they don't love the environment. Maybe something's happening in the locker room or with the coach or whatever, something has gone on, and then finding out what the real problem is and focusing on that versus quitting the sport that you love. But I also allow a child to avoid that burnout, maybe do something else. Maybe in the off season, let's try some other sport so that they can love their sport again, right? So I think it's important, to, again, have that family meeting or have that one-on-one with the child where you listen to them more than you talk and find out what are the issues that they're facing before you make any decision about what they want to do with their sport. Christopher, what do you think?
I think those are all really, really great points. I think, getting at the underlying of what's going on, you loved the sport at one point. What's changed about it? What's going on? Is there anything that you as the parent can help with? I also really like your suggestion of saying, hey, in the off season, let's do something else. And you mentioned another sport. And I think if the kid wants to do that, that's great. I would even say, do you want to do something that's not sports related? Do you want to give your body a bit of a rest? Do you want to try a new hobby or a new skill that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to do before because you've been so go with this sport? And the one thing I would say, this is a rule that I know our youth at Boys Town have, is whatever commitment you made, you finish it out. So if you committed to playing the winter basketball season, you finish out the season in winter basketball. And then if you want to make a decision after that, you can make that decision. But you made a commitment to your coach and your teammates and, in some cases, your family. If your family's been sacrificing a lot, finish out on your commitments. And I think, once again, going back to life lessons, this is a valuable life lesson to give the kid. I know it can get tricky because sports are becoming more and more year round, but at least evaluate what commitment do you say you would do, and then we can reevaluate that. Or maybe there's a natural break within the season that you can reevaluate that and figure out, what the next steps are going to be.
Definitely. The skill of following through is important. Yes.
Amen.
Okay, so the next question is more about being the parent during the sports season. So, what advice do you have for parents who may be overly invested in their kids' athletics? For example, maybe a parent gets caught up with a ref at the game or finds himself in a conflict and maybe not even intentionally. They might not even know that they're really becoming over involved. But how do we take a step back if we become that parent? Bridget?
Well, I'm sure Christopher has some great thoughts on this as well in his field working with families. I would just ask myself, what if I were the child? What if my child was screaming at me from the bleachers? What if the coach told me I was a good parent? Would I like that? Would that be the right thing to do? Trying to take their perspective on that. Never, ever speak out loud when I'm angry. And just try to remember I am their cheerleader. I'm their fan. And if I'm doing something that's going to embarrass myself, my child, my school, I should step back, get calm, and wait. So I think that when parents kind of think in that point of view, what if I was the person down there on the field? How would I feel about what's happening here? And am I representing my child in a way that would make them feel proud of me or themselves? I think parents are not thinking, when they're emotional, and they have to step back and get calm in order to think. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think those are all great suggestions. I would say, for yourself as a parent, set those tolerances before you even enter the stadium. I will not talk to the referees. I will not talk to the coach during the game. I will only cheer positively for my kid and his teammates. I think by setting those kind of ground rules for yourself, it might help avoid one of those things. I really like what you said is never speak when you're angry. If there's really a major issue, and this is coming from someone that's both played and coached sports, if there's a major issue with a referee where you really feel like they did something egregious, there are proper channels that you can make a formal complaint after the game. If you really have a problem with the coach and you think they did something that you really don't want your kid to just take care of on their own, so there are cases where that can happen. Set up a meeting with the coach. Don't approach them at halftime. Don't approach them on the bench. Don't approach them after the game. As the coach, if there's really something going on where you as the parent need to address it, addressing the coach right after an emotionally charged game is not going to be the best result for anybody. And I would ask also the parent, maybe this is a question for them to ask themselves, is by doing these things, what are you hoping to accomplish? Mm-hmm. You're not going to change the coach's mind during the game. You're not going to change the referee's mind during the game. If anything, you're just going to set them more against whatever position you're going towards. And the one last thing I'll add is I was doing some research for this talk is we're facing a huge shortage in officials and referees in the country because officials come to these games and work. They don't do it for the money. They do get paid, but it's not worth their time. They're taking up their weekends because they love the sport that they're working with and they want to see young people get involved in it. But if they're going to be abused by parents, coaches, and fans, it's not going to be worth it for a lot of these people. So we have to think we want to be able to continue the sport for generations to come. And by doing that, we need to support and foster positive sportsmanship, both with the kids, but also with the adults as well.
Yeah, I saw some information showing that kids are not getting into sports as they did decades before. So we're seeing a drop in both of that. Yep. And people are helping, and also with kids getting involved with sports. It's a shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we all want our kids in sports and to have fun and do well and to be those cheerleaders from the stands. So definitely take a minute to be retrospective and think, how can I be a better parent for both my kid and for the environment around as a whole? So that's great insight. Yeah. Perfect. Well, any other last words about tips for talking to your young athlete to share, either of you?
Well, I just want to share a little quote. You know me and my little quotes. Well, this is not my quote, but I thought it was interesting. Behind every young child who believes in himself is a parent who believed first. And how we show that belief is so very important. We get our kids involved in sports because they want to do this and we want to support them. So being that great cheerleader and being a good support is so important. I know Christopher would agree with that. Any other thoughts you have?
Well, I wish I had a wonderful quote to wrap up our time together, but I would say show up physically, emotionally, and mentally for your kids. Be 100% positive and be present, and just really enjoy the time. I think kids go through this sports phase so quickly, and really just enjoy the time you get to see your kid trying something new and learning new skills and getting to interact with new people.
Well said. I think that was great.
Thank you.
As do I. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for watching. We really hope that these tips help both in the spring sports season and beyond. We'll make sure to link our Common Sense Parenting classes above this video. So if you want to browse by your zip code and sign up for a class, we would absolutely love to have you. And I'll also make sure to link resources for the Boys Town Center for Behavioral Health if you're local and would like to request an appointment with Christopher or any of the other awesome people there. We will put that info in as well. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and we'll catch you next month. Bye-bye.